Robert Bowman came into our area on a tour for the Patriots, and he's here to kind of let us know about what he's been doing mostly. But first, we're going to ask him about his background. Could you introduce yourself and share how you got to this point and what background you have?
Sure. I'm Bob Bowman, retired Lieutenant Colonel, United States Air Force, flew 101 combat missions in Vietnam as a fighter pilot. My PhD is in aeronautics and nuclear engineering from Caltech. I directed all the Star Wars programs under Presidents Ford and Carter when their existence was secret. And I'm the national commander of the Patriots. Our website is thepatriots.us. And I'm also primate of the United Catholic Church, which is a Catholic Church which is independent of the Vatican and doesn't follow their man-made rules.
Fascinating. I'm wondering, your work with Star Wars, what did that consist of, and what were you doing back there and before I even knew about it?
Well, I directed all of the Department of Defense's Star Wars programs, and there were a lot of things going on at DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, and I was the executive for all those programs. We had several things going, but one that people will relate to mostly has to do with laser battle stations, because we were developing all the bits and pieces. The laser itself we were developing with TRW, the mirror, 50-foot diameter actively cooled mirror we were developing with Kodak and PerkinElmer, the tracking system we were developing, and the computers, and that was with Raytheon. We had system studies being done by Lockheed, and of course we had Aerospace Corporation advising us and doing a lot of work. We proved several things during those years. One is that a system of laser battle stations, before it got anywhere near capable of shooting down ballistic missiles, would be good enough to destroy cities in minutes, causing the kind of firestorms that consumed Dresden and Hamburg and Osaka in World War II. In other words, it was much more effective as an offensive weapon than a defensive weapon.
What energy source was it using?
These were chemical lasers. And one thing we later discovered is that a few pounds of metal properly shaped, fired from toward the Earth from space, would impact like a meteorite, dig a crater, and at least in theory be capable of destroying hardened military targets like command bunkers and missile silos totally without warning. For years, that's all I said about these weapons. And then in a debate that I did with one of the colonels who was in the SDI program under Reagan, when I was arguing that these things would never make a defense, but they were awesome offensive weapons and ought to be banned, and we shouldn't attempt to deploy them because it would trigger nuclear war. So I went from directing all the Star Wars programs to being its fiercest critic under Reagan when he turned it from a research program trying to understand what was possible and what wasn't, and countermeasures, and doing system studies, and trying to keep an open mind to what was possible and what might be in our national security interest. But always coming up with the, as far as I was concerned, the answer that it was not in our national security interest to actually develop and deploy these weapons. But of course, what we in the military used to call the Lunatic Fringe convinced Reagan otherwise. Danny Graham, Crazy George, Keegan, Edward Teller, these guys. And so he proceeded to turn this quiet research program into a crash program to deploy offensive weapons disguised as defense.
Has it ever been used, a laser weapon?
Not in purpose against a real target. There have been tests, there have been accidents, There have been incidents where some of our satellites were blinded by lasers, ground-based lasers coming out of the eastern half of the world. And but the short answer is no. And I don't believe that they have deployed anything like that. A lot of people are worried that those things are up there orbiting today, and I really don't think so. I'm sort of out of touch now with the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I had a bunch of my students and people who had worked for me in the JCS for many years, and they kept me up to date on what was going on. And as of that time, the answer was nothing. But now I don't know, because those guys have all retired or died off. It was interesting because Reagan's own Joint Chiefs of Staff called me in 1983 and early '84, and they said, "Bob, you've got to do something. There's a gag order. We can't say anything. We can't write anything without it being going through the White House censors. We're totally powerless. But even if we retired, we'd still have the gag orders, but you retired in time before Reagan took over. They have no legal hold on you. You've got to warn Congress and the American people about this military lunacy." And in particular, they were concerned about the White House's plans to use the shuttle as a test bed to test the weapons against targets on the surface of the Earth. And they said if they do that, it would confirm the Russians' fear that the shuttle is just a weapons platform. I mean, they're already making propaganda like that, and of course we're denying it. But now the White House wants to actually do it, you know. And so anyway, I did get to the right people in Congress, and we were able to kill these things. But there was a lot of craziness going on.
What was the lessons that you learned from Vietnam as a combat veteran, and that was probably shaped you in a certain way?
Well, yeah, I learned that war is hell.
Yeah.
I also learned that war is addictive, because when they tried to transfer me back to Korea from Vietnam after I'd completed 101 missions, it was only supposed to be 100, but on my 100th mission, my wingman had a mechanical problem and couldn't take care of the target. So I had to go back, pick up another wingman, and make a 101st mission to take care of the target. So, but after that, they tried to send me back to Korea, where I had just come from before my Vietnam tour. One-time good deal, Korea to Vietnam to Korea. And I didn't want to go, because I was so caught up in the war and the mission and all the rest of it. I didn't want to leave. And looking back on it, it's hard for me to understand that, but I can understand that war is addictive. And it's also dehumanizing. It didn't get me, fortunately, but I flew with some people that would go down and take out a fisherman on a sampan. And I said, "How did you know he was VC?" And he's, "Oh, who cares? It's all body count." I mean, that kind of stuff. So, I mean, I learned a lot of lessons from Vietnam. What I learned from fighting Star Wars for the Reagan administration is that one person can make a difference.